Well, welcome back, everyone. I know we were all working together very closely back in 2025, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and we're finally back after a long holiday to talk about Phoenix Design Week and some things that we learned from that event. So before we get started, I'd like everyone to kind of introduce themselves. We'll start with Kylie. Tell us your name, your current role, and experience in the industry.
Yeah, so my name is Kylie Dukes. I have been here at Ideas Collide now for 5 years. Started as an intern here, and I am a production designer here. And I worked on Phoenix Design Week for 2 years now in a row, and it's been awesome.
Very nice.
Sarah?
I'm Sarah Cody. I'm creative director at Anderson Advertising and PR. This is my first foray into helping out and volunteering with Phoenix Design Week, but I've been with Anderson for almost 5 years. And before that, just in-house at a ton of different places. I've been in the design industry for a little over 15 years and in a design and creative operations, strategic management, and brand operations type roles. So all rolling into creative director now.
Cool. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Morgan. I'm a president and creative director of my own design studio, Morgan and Company, for many years. And I'm also currently hanging out with the creative team at Lavage. For this conversation, I've been a board member of AIGA Arizona for 14 years now and serving on the volunteer team to produce Phoenix Design Week since 2014, and this past year was the executive producer of the event.
Nice. And I'm Ryan Lowry. I'm a design lead here at Ideas Collide, about to hit 10 years working here.
Very nice.
And been in the industry for going on 18 years now. And then been involved with Phoenix Design Week since 2014, been kind of on and off with it, but about 5 years kind of dedicated working on that one. So I'd like for us to kind of kick off by talking about what is Phoenix Design Week and why is it so important? And I think, Kathy, you might be a good person to kick that off.
I think I'm the only human being, in fact, I know I'm the only human being on the planet who has attended every Phoenix Design Week since 2009 when it was first created. And it was originally, what's been interesting to me this year is there's a lot of echoes for me since when it was created, because that was right after 2008 and everything in the economy was weird at that time. So we see some echoes of it now, I think. It feels kind of the same. So the originator of Phoenix Design Week, Mark Dudlick, was a young designer and wrote a letter to the community that said, hey, if we want to make ourselves known, we have to make a big splash. So he conceived of a design week, much like bigger cities have, that would bring together all the design disciplines in some way, and came together with AIGA Arizona, who is the professional design organization, to make this come to life. And it was originally conceived as a week of events. It still is a week of events, and anchored by a 2-day professional conference. And they didn't exactly know whether it would work at the time or not. I remember attending the very first one and helping sign people in and give them their badges and so on. And it worked, and people wanted to come out and be in community with each other and say, hey, Phoenix is a design destination. It's important for us to be seen here.
Sarah, why don't you give us your take and your experience with Phoenix Design Week a little more recently?
Yeah, absolutely. Anderson was the brand sponsor this year. So it started as just sort of a volunteer inquiry, seeing how we could get the team involved, how I could get personally involved. And at the time, the team was still looking for that role to be filled. So we stepped into that role. And it quickly turned into just sort of overall creative direction for the event holistically. So worked with all the different teams involved, super collaborative process, but from the start of it, it was just brand development strategy around kind of the rooted idea that the team was really leaning into, exploration. We came up with several variations of what a theme could be, and it just sort of all pulled us back to that rooted theme. So we pushed and leaned into that quite a bit, and then once that was established, brand book, guidelines for everyone to kind of follow and help execute all of the other pieces. It's such a massive event, and I think I quickly realized that it was much bigger than just the brand effort. So we collaborated with, social communications, events, logistics, speakers, multimedia, right, video, all of the digital assets that come along with that, and then just all of the efforts that help get the word out to the community. Just got to oversee how the brand was implemented from start to finish. So it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, and just to clarify, my role this past year with Phoenix Design Week was a creative manager, primarily for web and video.
Yep.
And Sarah, you were really awesome about stepping in.
Thank you.
And providing creative direction, maybe a little bit more than you anticipated, but super helpful with your vision and everything you provided this past year.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun to see it all come to life. I think when you start with just a logo and a color palette, there's infinite possibilities, and everyone sort of has their own subjective take on what that can look like. So reining that in a couple places and helping, coach up on the things that we really wanted to lean into, from the supplemental graphics, what colors we're contrasting, the legibility, the accessibility, all of that kind of stuff. There's no shortage of things to keep in mind, especially from a web standpoint. You want everyone to have a pleasant experience when, they're coming to seek information and, get grounded in what the event is going to be. And you want that to be easy. You want it to be, a quick get, and just a pleasant experience. So your legacy involvement definitely set the parameters, and I think I was just there to kind of smooth over some of the visuals at the end of the day, but it was nice to collaborate on that.
Cool. Kylie, why don't you get into your involvement this past year?
Yeah, absolutely. Being kind of newer into design in general, it was kind of awesome to kind of get thrown in and have ownership of designs and getting to work with multiple different teams, because it was really good practice just day to day, but working with everybody was amazing. I got to work on some really cool assets, got to do the badges and the lanyards and those things, and that was such a great experience and kind of good way to get, out there professionally in general. But yeah, it was amazing, and I absolutely love volunteering and doing this. It's getting to talk to everybody is one of the biggest and most energizing and rewarding experiences. You
had a great eye for the way all of the graphics came together. I know it was, everything probably felt very sporadic up front when we just sort of handed over all of the elements, and even just the first couple passes of the badges and the lanyards and the signage and all that, it just felt very spot on. So you were a pleasure to work with, and very,
I really appreciate it.
You got the understanding, you understood the assignment.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. You guys were, everybody, being able to just message you guys, even if it was super late at night, going, hey, I need help or something. You guys were always so responsive, and such a pleasure to work with.
Maybe we can get into our experiences as attendees for Phoenix Design Week. And I can start. Before Phoenix Design Week and before I was involved with the AIGA, I kind of just stayed at home, just did my job. I didn't really connect with people. So Phoenix Design Week was really cool for me because I actually sort of kicked off networking and getting involved with the community through the event. And I'm not sure if I would be quite as social or do those networking things if it wasn't for this particular event.
I have to agree with that. I think we're all in this industry a little shy and introverted, and to be able to have this place that it's safe to go, that people understand you, and it's been huge for me to participate as a board member, as a volunteer on this team, and have a place that I can lend the skills that I've developed over my career when you wonder if it really matters when you're up late at night and so on. To be able to contribute to this team, participate with people, like, where else do I get to work with the folks at Ideas Collide, at Lavage, at Anderson, and be a part of those teams as an independent person? And I would never get to work with all of you otherwise unless I worked at those places. So it gives you a place to participate, a place to be, to lend your skills. I remember having a revelation at some point that, why am I doing this? It's a lot of work. I'm not getting paid. And I had a shift in my thinking that it's not what I'm getting out of it, it's what I can give to it, what I can offer to it. And it's been incredibly rewarding for me. People will say to me now, like, oh, you're everywhere, you have such a big network, you know everybody. And it's just showing up. It's being there and saying hello, showing up. There's wording, or like a phrase of this year that is convenience. What is it? Convenience kills community. So people now are so used to being at home and you can get anything you want. You don't have to go anywhere, but at what cost? And yeah, I've learned a lot from it. I've really expanded myself a lot from doing this.
I think creatives can fall into like isolation mode and just, get really comfortable working with their blinders on. And for the team at Anderson in particular, we've got a little bit of a younger team, so professional development and being able to stretch your legs and design skills on sort of a passion project that didn't have too strict of boundaries. We had a loose creative brief, but the collaborative process was awesome. You don't always get a client that operates that way, so it was really fun to stretch professional development design skills in that standpoint. But just the networking, the community, the collaboration, like those are, again, things that you don't necessarily take the initiative to do or to find or to seek out on your own. But when you understand that there are so many other people from so many different walks of creative life coming together at the same time, it feels a little less scary. You're not by yourself. And then, the fact that it's a week-long engagement with events all over the valley. If you're not comfortable or if you don't have the time or the capacity, schedules don't allow, whatever it is, to sit down at the conference itself, there's always some micro engagement, a smaller, part of the community. And you can kind of curate that to whatever you're comfortable experiencing. So it's all of that sort of wrapped up into one. So there's no shortage of opportunity, I think, for everyone to sort of make it their own.
Nice.
She's a great spokesperson.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Again, want to give you a shout out. Sarah had an opportunity to speak on stage. This was a newer thing for us to really kind of go over the creative process and all the strategy and thought behind the branding this year. And
Yeah.
it was really great. Great to get a little peek behind the curtain, and great job on presenting all that.
Thank you. I received a lot of nice feedback from attendees after. It was the prep and getting on stage isn't something everyone's comfortable with, and I'm still learning how to be comfortable myself, but the process was something that a lot of people were really interested in. So seeing what didn't work, seeing how many iterations of the logos and typography we had experimented with, understanding that it's okay to fail and fail fast as long as you're surrounded by people who are willing to bounce ideas off of you and collaborate and get it across the finish line. So yeah, lots of just a peek behind the curtain. Like you said, it was new, not something that everyone got in years past, but I think definitely would be beneficial moving forward for whoever's, in that brand position to just, it's not all, everything you see on the day of the event doesn't necessarily cover the whole experience of the journey to get there. So it's just nice to get a sneak peek behind that.
Definitely. And I think also giving some insight on how much work it is. Some people who attend the event, they may not realize it's really like an 8-month process
Absolutely.
to put it all together. So a lot of time and effort, a lot of thought put into everything. So I think it's really cool for the attendees to kind of see that and kind of appreciate every little aspect of it a little bit more.
Yeah, that stuff does not happen overnight. Everyone in this room can attest to how long that process is, but everyone sort of puts in their own energy, and the flexibility of the team was something that I really appreciated as a first timer volunteering, just to see if someone wasn't available, there was always someone who was going to step up. There was everyone was coming at it from a problem solving perspective. If there was a roadblock or an obstacle or a challenge and, logistics or creative execution, whatever it was, there was always someone you could, Slack or text or email or tag in Basecamp, and, someone would get back to you with, the right course of action. So it's a long time coming, but it pays off to see it all come together.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was super rewarding as an attendee, as someone who also, did design and volunteering, because I'm sitting behind people as they're going through, the book and everything, and they're commenting on, wow, this turned out so awesome, or this was my favorite branding this year. So being able to see it from that other side too is really awesome, and just watching everyone kind of experience the brand that we've been staring at for the past, 8 months.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And, just being able to be around everybody, I think is, as a more introverted type person, I was like, wow, this is the coolest experience that I've ever had as a designer so far. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not often, at least in some of the work we do, where you get that real feedback and you get to kind of listen in on people, reviewing your stuff and seeing it live and interacting with it. That's not as common, especially with a lot of the digital work we do. So very cool to see an in-person event and see how people respond to it.
Yeah.
For anyone listening in that maybe is not super aware of Phoenix Design Week or doesn't know what it's about, let's talk a little bit about what the conference entails and what the week of events entails. So I think starting with the conference, we bring in a lot of speakers, both locally and nationally recognized. What exactly are they kind of getting into? What are they covering? What are the learnings from this event? And I think, Kathy, maybe you can kick that off.
So every year we start with the theme, and sometimes people have come to us from past years and they will say that they want to speak at this event. It's well known enough across the United States and in other communities that people sometimes come to us. But we often will go and seek them out based on the theme. So that's what starts everything. And then we ask these, when we send out invitations, we ask the keynote speakers from elsewhere, and people have told us that they appreciate hearing, even though it's Phoenix Design Week, we bring in people from the outside world so they get a greater perspective, let's say. So we send out invitations, we tell them what the theme is and ask if they can speak to that. So it's rooted, for instance. And a lot of times people will kind of have a speech already or a talk already that they've done, but they will say, yes, I can talk to that. I can customize my talk to do that. And we set up the conference like many professional conferences that you've been to, where there are keynote speakers on a main stage, and then there are also breakout speakers. So the keynote speakers we will typically bring in from outside, and then the breakouts, we highlight the local community. So we send out a call for submissions, if you will, and ask people to speak to not only the theme, but things that we know that the audience has said that they want. It might be Adobe training. It might be trends, like what's happening with AI. It might be we want more UX. We hear that a lot. But the conference itself, we have to walk that tightrope and make it more broad. It's not a specific conference about UI, for instance. It's about design in general. What are the trends? What is interesting to people? So it's much more of a general overview of design, and people will be able to focus on what they like. They might come because a certain speaker is there and they want to meet them, and certainly we will help facilitate that if possible and make those speakers available that people can interact with. People will often tell us there are too many good things. I can't decide which session to attend, and that's one thing that we're thinking about for this next year is how might we repeat some of those popular sessions that people were like, darn, I really wish I could have seen that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
That's
That's
perfect.
awesome.
As well, we have the week of events, and I know just off the top of my head, there's silk screening workshops, there's calligraphy and stuff like that, but I'm wondering if we can kind of talk through the week of events and the value those bring to the event as well.
Going back to the original goal of Phoenix Design Week, that it was supposed to be or intended to be something that would make a significant presence and splash. And so that might not be just in one day. And part of it is highlighting and showcasing the community that we do have here. And that is not only Phoenix, it's throughout Arizona, happens in Tucson and Flagstaff. And we've had events in Prescott and various other places in the state to say, hey, people show up. This is a place that you can come to, and conversations are being had. The whole intent was to highlight the community that we have. So not only does AIGA Arizona put on events during that week, but we send out a call for submissions and ask people, if you are having a design-related event during this time frame, can you arrange to host it during this week? Or if you are, we'll put it on our community calendar. Which reminds me of something else. AIGA Arizona has just recently launched its own ongoing community calendar. So if there are any design, creative-related events that you're interested in having the chapter highlight, I believe on the website, aigaaz.org, there is a submission form that you can have your events put on our calendar.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Let's talk about Phoenix Design Week this past year and maybe like our favorite speakers, moments, quotable things from the speakers. I think, Kylie, maybe you can kick that off.
Yeah, absolutely. There were another problem to have, a good problem to have, I guess, is there's too many good speakers, you know, especially the breakout sessions and stuff. But one of my favorite keynote speakers this time, just not only because he was entertaining, but just he had a lot of wealth of information, was Bill Gardner. He was amazing. And one of my favorite quotes that he said was, branding is about creating experiences that make people feel something. And I think that kind of quote kind of trends with that whole, this whole, like all the other speakers, what they were saying was, you know, branding, you're not just throwing something, out there in the world and, hoping that there's like strategy, and it is about creating something that evokes emotion in people, just a certain emotion. It could be good or bad, whatever your final goal is, but just listening to him speak and seeing how much it resonated with everybody, and even getting to talk to him after was awesome. But there were so many good and amazing speakers out there that I wish I could have attended every single one. There's just not enough time.
Yeah, Bill Gardner was a standout for me as well. Definitely very comfortable on stage, very bombastic, and even just with the kind of silk, flowery jacket that he wore, the apparel kind of matched the rooted theme for this year. I liked everything he brought to the table, and being with Logo Lounge as well, kind of learning about the trends and seeing the evolution in logos at least. That was kind of cool too. I remember he brought up the little schmokies, seeing the rounded weenie tips and and logos popping up over the years. But yeah, he was definitely a good one. Is there any others that stood out for either of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree on what you guys said about Bill. So animated and just high energy, and you definitely need that at a conference. The speakers can get a little bit long-winded at times, so to just revive the whole room and really engage the audience, and just the display of his presentation too, and the pacing of that was awesome. I really leaned into Michael Janda's presentation and his speech, more so because I live in like both the right and left brain type world. So I love everything I do from a creative space, but I'm also I love to have a seat at the table to understand the business at hand and to understand what is going to move the needle for our clients. So he spoke more heavily about scaling a business and more from an entrepreneurial lens. Also, the things that didn't work for him. It's fun to celebrate and talk about all the sexy stuff you get to do and the fun clients that you get to experience along the way. Sometimes that doesn't come until very late in a person's career. So to hear him say like, my agency struggled, my business struggled, here's how I overcame that. Here's my formula for networking, right? Like, and it doesn't work for everyone, right? But something to try, a new perspective on that. There were literal formulas that he was working through on like, okay, if you're going to think about this, you're making this much at your bottom line and you need to, hit a goal of X, right? Like, what do you need to do? And what are the pivot points that you need to be considerate of along that journey? And literally puts a packet of that information together by way of, books that he's authored and just information he was sharing with the audience and all of the charts and graphics. And again, from a creative standpoint, that might not be as interesting as, a smattering of logos to some, but I thought it was extremely interesting and helpful. And I think bridged the gap to for a wider audience, right? So Phoenix Design Week you don't only attend if you're a designer. You can attend if you're in communications, if you're in, if you're starting your own business, if you're just interested in some creative hobby, right? So he was speaking more, I think, again, to that entrepreneurial side of the business that creatives experience, and just a different take and something I hadn't seen in a while. So it was really nice to hear from him.
Cool. I know Dustin and Dan from Lincoln, I really enjoyed their talk too. A lot of great work that they presented. I also liked what they kind of covered with the retreats that they do. It made me think about some of the things we do here at Ideas Collide. I also like their unique take on just like their podcast, talking about, you can do a podcast episode while you're getting a tattoo or while you're in a hot tub. I'm sure it was very challenging, but
Sure.
they did it and they pulled it off. So just not limiting yourself with whatever creative idea you come up with. If it's outlandish, if it's hard, still go for it.
Yeah, I really, kind of along that tone, I really enjoyed Emily Cohen's, keynote.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah, because she really highlighted kind of ways that designers can kind of stop undermining themselves and each other.
Advocacy, for sure.
Yeah, definitely the advocacy of the industry. And, she mentioned that kind of what we do individually affects like the design industry as a whole, whether or not we realize it or not. Especially like undercutting prices and charging very little for work, and just even things in our own contracts that undermine ourselves, where we don't get exclusive freedom of our work or things like that. Just kind of, I never thought that, me as an individual could affect the industry, but after listening to her speak, I'm like, wow, I really do matter in this sea of designers, in this world.
Yeah. You think about your close circles, right? If you're probably not the only designer, right? So if you're talking to a friend or a colleague or someone, a student who's graduating and coming into the workforce from a creative standpoint, they're looking to us as more experienced professionals to give them advice on things. So if we're doing things in a specific way and our contracts are written in a certain way and we're sharing those things with people, they're taking them and maybe just, assuming that everything we say is kind of Bible because they don't know any better. So to, your point about what Emily was really digging into were a lot of teachable moments about just correcting some of those bad habits and really paying attention to the fine print in how we manage our businesses as creatives. And that goes down to something as simple as doing a free logo for your buddy or all the way up to, developing a contract for a, multi-million-dollar client that your agency may have at the end of the day. So a lot of good teachable moments. I think it was a little bit eye-opening too, because I'm sure there were a lot of young creatives in the audience too that maybe hadn't heard that take on things, but she was very firm in those stances and very convincing as well. So she had a very powerful presence on stage, I think.
Let's jump into trends we've seen from this past year and maybe going into 2026. Anything that we're seeing as far as trends in design or marketing, anything that's popping up for all of you?
I'm so not trend. I don't even know how to answer that question.
Can we ask ChatGPT?
Well, since you bring that up, something I'm seeing, so obviously AI is taking over.
Right.
AI tools are everywhere. I do think we're seeing a little bit of pushback on some of the AI that's out there, and people are seeking a little bit more authenticity with their content. I think AI tools definitely have their place. Yep. But one example I saw recently, two big brands that released commercials around the same time, Coca-Cola and Apple. Coca-Cola went full in on AI, and it wasn't really dramatically different from what they've done. They had the polar bears and all those elements you expect from like a wintry holiday themed Coca-Cola commercial, but they used AI completely. And then Apple, for Apple TV, they went with very practical effects, all physical props, essentially a few different glass panes of their logo that kind of did a rotating light effect. And we're seeing that people are very supportive of the Apple commercial, but they're really kind of tearing down the Coca-Cola commercial. So that's something that I'm seeing, that, AI is definitely, it's here, and it's going to be one of the tools we use, but maybe a little more careful consideration on where it makes sense to use those tools.
Yeah. I think where it makes sense and how far, right? Like how much you're using that and how much you're putting behind that. I think there's a limit. It's only as good as the people who are kind of curating how it's used. And if you're just taking it at face value with the first solution it spits out, like that's not really, I think, what it was intended for. But we're also in an age of instant gratification, right? You can get anything at your fingertips in a moment's notice. So time and speed to, delivery is something that I've noticed a lot of people talking about, but a lot of our clients kind of highlighting, like, does it really take that long? Like, can't you just use AI, right? And it's not a fallback. It's a supplemental tool that the people in our industry are, curating and using in a part of a process. It shouldn't necessarily dictate the end-all, be-all, and again, taking those things at face value. So from a trend perspective, I think the timing and planning and estimates alongside that are something that, people are expecting you to do more with less because these tools are so prevalent, right? Like, I can't count on both hands the number of AI platforms or systems or versions that are out there. I do think Adobe has done a really great way of implementing those all into their AI capabilities and making sure that obviously like the data behind that and the creative credentials are an ethical way to pull from that sort of stuff. But again, they always, speak at Max and, much larger conferences about paying attention to that and the ethical ways to use that and not just taking it at face value. So just something to consider.
Oh, definitely AI was a very big trend that a lot of different breakout speakers were like touching on. I think just because as creatives we're a little nervous, because we're like AI is getting better and better, but I think the common theme that multiple different speakers were kind of speaking about was that AI is just basically just a tool for ideas, options, and exploration, and it is not a replacement for creativity because AI is only pulling from what's there. It's not a human brain to be able to come up with its own ideas. So it's basically just sharing other people's ideas. And it was kind of reassuring because I was a little nervous. I was like, oh no, I'm going to get, my job, I'm going to get replaced eventually. But no, after the conference, I felt much better about AI, just kind of learning to maybe use it in a different way that I've never thought about, but also knowing that my job's a little safe, no, because it's not there yet, and it's not. I don't think we're ever going to actually be replaced by it. Just maybe parts, like helping planning or scoping or something that would help, but not the creativity side.
Yeah,
So.
I'm all for using it from an efficiency standpoint. If you can, like I was just saying, do more with less, right? But not sacrificing the strategy behind that and the understanding of the challenge you're trying to solve, the insight that you need to make it intelligent, the emotional connection that people are seeking from an authentic standpoint. If you take it without all of those things considered, I think it just becomes really shallow, and then that's when people get critical about stuff like the Coca-Cola spot. So it's a delicate balance, and you got to walk that line. But I think we're having enough of these conversations in our community too to get everybody, on the same page when it comes to that approach. So it's nice to be able to share those, same perspectives.
Cool. I don't know if this is necessarily a trend, but it does seem the people we're marketing to and communicating to, their attention spans are much lower than they have been. We're seeing a lot more short form video on social. It's a lot easier to get the message through if you can communicate in 10 seconds. And even with everyday stuff, whether you're watching a movie or you're commuting or whatever, everybody's on their phones. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's something I'm kind of noticing that we have to be very aware of for a lot of our audiences.
Yeah, just even these conversations that we're having from a podcast standpoint, social, we've done a ton more reels just to get a quick soundbite out in the universe instead of, swiping through a long format. Like even a carousel feels daunting to people nowadays. But I think it's a, short form video is also, it's much more dynamic, right? It has entertainment value. There's a little bit more depth to that. The user doesn't have to work as hard to understand the message or to get the tone from something that would otherwise be flat and, soundless and motionless and all that kind of stuff. So, we hear clients like, yeah, it's a 60-second spot, right? But we got to fit everything into the first 8 seconds because people can skip it after that, right? From a YouTube short perspective and all that kind of stuff. So, yes, while you need brand presence and you need that recognition up front quickly, there's, again, the strategy and the storytelling element that I think helps provide that authenticity in connection to the brands that you're working with. So you don't necessarily, I don't think you can have one without the other. So blending those two can be a delicate balance, I think, but definitely it's something we're seeing as well.
Cool. Oh yeah, another one that kind of comes to mind after you mentioned that. I see a lot of pushback on anything that's kind of more on the influencer side, where it's like kind of posed and it's not as real. I think anything you put out there, it's going to be kind of framed up a certain way, and it's not necessarily the most authentic. But anything that's very obviously kind of an influencer, like I'm doing this because it's a content piece.
Right.
So I don't know if any of you have seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how like TikTok and things like that have changed how everyone like consumes content in general. So I think us as creatives, we've had to pivot pretty quickly to kind of adapt to that. And but one of the other trends that I have recently been enjoying, growing up in the 90s, mascots used to be everywhere. And then they started kind of going away a bit.
Yeah.
You know, they were, and so that is, I'm starting to see that as a new trend for 2026. Even Bill Gardner mentioned that too, that mascots are coming back. You saw recently, dare I mention, Cracker Barrel. They kind of got rid of their like staple mascot, and that didn't go over so well for them. I think people kind of still want to have that recognition, you know, be able to recognize the brand and it still have its like personality. Even Jaguar recently did that. They got rid of their like, you know, little Jaguar head that they had as their logo, and now it's just the word. And so people are like, where's the personality? Where's the old company? And so I've really been enjoying like seeing mascots kind of coming back and popping back into the design.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
I think the pendulum swings so far in one direction that we're talking about trends, right? So when it starts, part of Bill Gardner's talk was, you know, you're successful when you develop a brand or a logo or a mark ahead of a trend, and then you're the trend setter, right? And then after that comes a flood of copycats, right? Like no new ideas. So now that mascots are back on the scene, I do think it's an easier way to bridge the storytelling element because you have a direct personality, right? They have hands, eyes, they talk to you, right? Like it's not a talking head like maybe an influencer might feel like. There's a dollar sign behind both at the end of the day, but it might feel a little bit more loose in a mascot perspective and a little bit more polished in an influencer perspective. So I think the influencers are moving away probably because it's, we know you get paid to say this. Like you're not telling us the unfortunate, side effects of whatever product you're pushing. You're telling us that it's great because someone's paying you to tell us it's great, right? And there's a direct benefit and people see through that really quickly. But from a mascot, they're not always real. They're not always tangible. They're not always even, they can be make-believe. They can literally be anything you want them to be on behalf of your brand. So you have a lot more flexibility to get away with how they interact with an audience as opposed to, just that flat product push. You see humor, you see emotion, you see, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's probably ties back to authenticity too. So just a different way to kind of spin that for your audiences.
That was great.
That was good.
That's it for me. Is there any last thoughts we want to close
Maybe
on?
we could talk about why people should attend Design
Yeah, that's a
Week.
good one.
We kind of did talk about it in talking about Design Week, but just directly why,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can start on that one. So I talked about how, I was sort of disconnected from the community and kind of just did my job and didn't do much more outside of that. That's definitely a reason to attend. I think a big thing for me with Phoenix Design Week is it recharges my battery. I do network, but not as much as I used to, and Phoenix Design Week is kind of the big event for me. So when I go there, I get to see these nationally recognized speakers that have a lot of insights, and they're really smart, and they share a lot of great insights into things. And I get inspired by that, and even just, the breakout speakers too that are more on a local level or the week of events. I I tend to feel a little bit drained as I'm going into that. But after it's over and after I leave, I feel inspired. And I feel like the timing is perfect too, because it's right around that like later fall time.
Yep.
And, you know, work's kind of busy, but it's getting close to wrapping up. And then going into winter, that's when I'm planning for the new year and like setting my goals and all that. So it's really, for me, great timing to get that inspiration.
For me, having participated deeply in this event for many, many years, there aren't a lot of opportunities to do a huge effort like this in your career. And to participate in an event like this, from planning every single detail to make this happen. So we've been talking about design a lot, but to bring an event like this together takes a really dedicated team, and there are many moving parts. And overall, you have this theme that you're talking to, and you're doing things like, how do the attendees sign up? Where are the bathrooms? Every single detail. And to be able to make that come together it's a high, to tell you the truth, to really make it happen. And that's been super rewarding for me, to learn all that, to lead the teams that do it. And then I'm realizing, as you're all talking about the speakers and what you heard from them and the little snippets, I attended differently after putting all the pieces in place. I go and it's like, finally, I get to sit here and just listen. And I almost don't hear what they say. I'm looking around to make sure that all of the attendees are having a good time, that the AV is working properly, and so on. And I also have had the opportunity to speak with and interact with all of these speakers and the presentations on an individual basis. So that is also rewarding for me, that I have made these connections with everybody who's there, and feel that now I have this huge group of friends that I could just reach out to. We've talked about Bill and Sadie Red Wing, for instance. What a great resource she was. And I could go on, but for me, participating like that and really being inside an event like this and knowing what it takes to pull it off, incredibly rewarding part of my career.
I guess that's a good plug to volunteer for Phoenix Design Week and get involved.
Absolutely.
The high you can get from running an event and potentially getting access to some of these speakers.
Yeah, I think the sense of how reinvigorated you are, when I was starting the process of creating the brand, the possibilities were endless. So that was exciting. Then getting through, took a lot of work, but that was also a networking opportunity. I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have otherwise come across in my everyday routine. And then I'll definitely share, everyone's sentiment about how you feel when you're there. Like, you feel recharged by the speakers. You feel proud of, the smooth logistics. You feel, I guess proud too when you're hearing feedback in those side conversations and getting compliments, or or even getting hard feedback. It's like, okay, we're learning from this. Like every year you're taking something different away from that, whether that's good or bad, and wanting to make the next one better. And I think that drive and that hunger to be a part of something bigger than just my everyday routine is the most exciting part of it. I really wanted it to be a professional development opportunity for the team at Anderson. It's hard to network when you're young. You've got so many other priorities. but it's also hard to network when you're a little bit older too, right? You have your priorities change, and there are other things that come in that can get in the way. But it just made everything so easy. And I mentioned it earlier, you can really curate your experience with Phoenix Design Week however you want it to be. So it doesn't have to be this daunting thing that you're committed to 7 days out of the week. Like, that's a lot to ask of people. But if you do, you're pulling something different from every interaction. You're meeting someone that could be a business opportunity, that could be a referral, that could be your best friend, that could be a person to bounce ideas off of when you're stuck, in creative purgatory. So no shortage of reasons to attend. It really is beneficial to everybody at any stage and any perspective of how you connect to, a creative community. I think Phoenix is such a melting pot too. We're LA adjacent from, a big, production, Hollywood, creative hub. And obviously the East Coast has its own thing. So just to see everyone from a different walk of life, you're going to find someone you can connect with. And if you don't, you're going to find something that you can personally connect with, and maybe that influences you to be a better, a different, or a more savvy creative at the end of the day.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, getting to just network was the biggest thing. That's pretty much the reason I started, going, just attending as just an attendee, but volunteering, just connecting with, I think, just people at different stages of their career and seeing their perspective on things, which is going to be completely different from the students that I would talk to that volunteered there. Sure. Which has been awesome, because there was ASU students and even GCU students that were there, and just having them also ask me questions, and just to think that, just a few years ago I was them, and they're talking to me now, asking me all these questions about the industry, and I'm like, wow, just to be able to connect with them that way, and I normally would never be able to, talk to them, and half these people, like walking up to someone, like Bill, or would be normally daunting, and I probably wouldn't really approach them, but being in that, just at the conference, you're kind of just energized by all that, and you might actually reach out more than you would just outside of that. So
yeah, you ride the buzz.
Exactly. Yeah, just that whole, just being there at that whole event really just reset my creative spirit, I guess, is for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth, even if you're not volunteering, just going as an attendee. It's the best.
Yeah, there was actually this past year, I usually go out to lunch with my friends or people I'm more familiar with, but I decided just to randomly walk out, and I came across a couple of GCU students that were about to graduate, and had a really great lunch and conversation with them, and it was kind of just like you were mentioning. They kind of just downloaded all the information from me, and it was great. It was a good experience.
Yeah.